Welcome. Today, we're diving into the story of one man, one incredible cricket match, and a single moment of pure fury that ended up creating one of the greatest rivalries in all of sports. This is the story of Fred Spofforth, cricket's very first demon, the guy who practically invented the Ashes all by himself.
All right, let's start here. Just 5 simple words. But these weren't spoken with hope or with optimism. No, they were spoken with sheer, white-hot rage. And these 5 words, roared by a guy named Frederick Spofforth in a London dressing room way back in 1882, would completely flip a cricket match on its head and, believe it or not, change sports history forever.
So that's really the big question we're tackling. How on earth did one guy's temper, all because of something he saw as just not cricket, end up sparking this legendary contest that people have been obsessed with for over 140 years? Well, let's get into it.
To really understand the man in that moment, we've got to rewind a few years. See, before he was a legend, Fred Spofforth was this total unknown from the colonies, a guy who was about to introduce himself to the world in the most dramatic way you can imagine. So picture this. It's May 1878. You're at Lord's, which is basically the cathedral of English cricket. This touring Australian team is playing the MCC, and the MCC was pretty much the full-strength England side. And out comes this tall, skinny bowler who someone described as having a devilish look on his face, and he just tears them to shreds. It sent an absolute shockwave through the English cricket world.
And here are the numbers, and they are just insane. In that one game, Spofforth took 10 wickets for only 20 runs. Now, to put that into perspective, taking 10 wickets means you've pretty much dismissed the entire other team by yourself. And he did it while they only scored 20 runs off him. He even got the legendary W.G. Grace, the biggest star of the era, out for a duck. Not a single run. It was just complete and utter demolition.
And this just tells you everything you need to know about the guy's personality. After that performance, he supposedly went back to the dressing room, just spinning around and chanting, "Ain't I a demon? Ain't I a demon?" You know what? The press and players agreed. From that day on, he was the Demon Bowler. He gave himself the nickname, and he earned it.
So what was his secret? What made him so ridiculously good? Well, it wasn't just about being fast. Spofforth was an innovator. He was a master of trickery who brought this whole new psychological game to bowling. Let's break down his toolkit.
He had this kind of 3-pronged attack. First, pure intimidation. He was one of the first bowlers to just stare batsmen down, using this intense eye contact to get in their heads. Total game changer. Second, he could change his speed from fast to slow without changing his arm action at all, which completely confused batters. And third, he perfected this delivery called the breakback, which would dart sideways off the pitch, making it almost impossible to hit.
And don't just take my word for it. Listen to what an English batsman named Billy Barnes said about facing him. He said Spofforth's stare felt like a red-hot poker going right through him. He even called him a hypnotist and said he should have been forced to bowl wearing sunglasses. That's the kind of mental hold he had on guys before he even let go of the ball. Okay, get this. This story is amazing, and it shows you the kind of incredible control he had. This wasn't just brute strength, it was finesse. The story goes that he could throw a freshly laid egg 50 yards without it breaking. Now, if you can do that with something so fragile, just imagine the subtle, incredible things he could do with a hard cricket ball. The man was an artist.
Right, so let's put it all together. The skill, the anger, that iron will. It all leads us to this one legendary match in 1882 at the Oval in London. This is the moment it all boils over and creates a sporting legend. The match itself was this gritty, low-scoring nail-biter. After both teams batted, Australia set England a ridiculously small target of just 85 runs to win. I mean, victory for England looked like a sure thing. But then came the flashpoint. The great W.G. Grace ran out a young Aussie batsman, Sammy Jones, in a way the Australians thought was totally unsporting. And that single act lit a raging fire under Fred Spofforth. He was furious, absolutely incensed. He turned to his captain, Billy Murdoch, and made that quiet, seething promise. Then he stormed into the dressing room and just roared at his teammates, "This thing can be done." It wasn't a suggestion, it was a declaration of war. So let's be clear about how small this target was. 85 runs. In Test cricket, that is a walk in the park. The massive crowd, about 20,000 people at the Oval, they were all just sitting back, waiting for the easy English win.
And for a while there, it looked like they were right. England got to 51 runs with only 2 guys out. They only needed 34 more runs. W.G. Grace, the big man himself, was still at the crease. Victory seemed like a lock. Game over, right? But then, the demon went to work. Fueled by that rage, Spofforth bowled like a man possessed. His last 11 overs cost just 2 runs. 2! And in that time, he took 4 wickets. The English batsmen, as one reporter put it, were totally demoralized. They just had no answer. It was an irresistible avalanche.
And in one of the most stunning comebacks in sports history, Australia won by just 7 runs. The shock was so huge that a journalist wrote this funny, satirical obituary in the Sporting Times, and it famously said that English cricket had died, and that, quote, the body will be cremated and the ashes taken to Australia. And just like that, from a joke in a newspaper, a legend was born. But here's the thing. While that one match made him a legend, Spofforth's entire career was about being a pioneer. He wasn't just a great player, he was a true trailblazer, setting records that are still in the history books today. I mean, just look at this list of firsts. 3 years before that famous Ashes match, he took the first ever hat trick in Test cricket history. He was the first bowler ever to get to 50 Test wickets. And, in a funny twist, he was also the first number 11 batsman, that's the last guy in, to actually be the top scorer in a Test match. It just shows you he never, ever gave up. Now, when you see he only played 18 Test matches, you might think that's not a lot. But you have to remember, this was the 19th century. That was a pretty long career back then. And to take 94 wickets with an average of 18.41, well, that is just mind-blowingly good. It puts him right up there with the absolute all-time greats. His impact was way bigger than the number of games he played.
So what happened to the Damon after he stopped playing? Well, his influence didn't just stop at the boundary rope. He actually ended up settling in England, of all places, and built a whole new life, even as his legend back in Australia was becoming immortal. Yeah, he settled down in England, got married, and became a really successful managing director of a big tea company. But he never lost that sharp, competitive mind. While playing for a local English county, he actually uncovered a huge financial fraud being run by the club's secretary. It took a while, but eventually the cricket world officially recognized his greatness, putting him in both the Australian and the ICC Halls of Fame. And there is no better symbol of what he means to his home country than this. If you ever go to the Sydney Cricket Ground, you can see his bronze statue standing there. It's a permanent tribute to the man they call Australia's first great cricketing hero, the bowler whose fire and genius created a legend that's still going strong. Which leaves us with one last thing to think about. The story of the Ashes shows us that sometimes the most celebrated traditions, the things we love the most, can come from a single moment of anger, a feeling of injustice, and just the stubborn refusal to accept defeat. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Maybe conflict isn't always just about destruction. Maybe sometimes it's the very thing that forges the greatest legacies.